If you've ever wondered who our earliest ancestors were, or if you've ever been fascinated by the lives of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other human relatives, or if you've ever wanted to see how survival, creativity, and adaptation shaped the world we lived in, if so, then today's course just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing Early Humans, Ice, Stone, and Survival by Suzanne Pilaar Birch. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan. And on this channel, I review everything I read, from novels and memoirs to history, philosophy, and even full lecture series like this one. Though not strictly a book, it's still something that I think deserves a review. My goal is to give you thoughtful summaries, honest reactions, and a clear sense of who each book or series, of course, might be right for. If you love learning across genres and disciplines, you're in the right place. This video is part of my Great Courses playlist, where I cover the lecture series that I've been watching. I use them heavily as research from my other channel, History Unraveled by Dr. Duncan. That channel is designed to give long-form history content, almost like a college survey course for anyone who wants a deep dive into the past. Because of that, these reviews tend to run longer than my usual book reviews. I'm not just giving you a quick reaction here. I try to put my full notes into each review, so you'll get a detailed breakdown of what's covered, what stood out to me, and how the course fits into bigger questions of history and culture. So if that interests you, please check out the Great Courses playlist, and also please check out my other channel if that sounds interesting to you. Before we dig into this course, let's of course talk about the presenter. The presenter is Suzanne Pilaar Birch. She is an associate professor of anthropology and geography at the University of Georgia. She earned her PhD in archaeology from the University of Cambridge and has extensive experience as a field archaeologist. She's the editor of the volume Multi-Species Archaeology and has written more than 30 scholarly articles and book chapters. In her academic work, she is a co-founder of Trailblazers, a nonprofit dedicated to highlighting the contributions of women in archaeology, paleontology, and geology. Her research has received major support from organizations such as the National Geographic Society, the National Science Foundation, and the UK's Arts and Humanities Research Council. So clearly she's an individual that knows what she is talking about. With that in mind, let's jump into this course. Let's take a look at it lecture by lecture. There's only 20 lectures, which for the Great Courses is on the shorter side, although 10 hours of lecture is still a fair amount of time. I do think that that is enough for us to dig into each lecture and give you at least maybe a paragraph or so about what I found to be the main point of each of these lectures, and hopefully that is helpful to you. If this is more than you bargained for, then go ahead and skip forward and jump right into another part of the video, maybe her argumentative distinctions or the fun facts, or whatever you want. But for those of you that are interested, here are the lectures one by one. The first lecture is, what does it mean to be human? This lecture introduces the origins of Homo sapiens in East Africa, tracing early fossils like Lucy, the incredibly famous skeleton that has been found of an Australopithecus afarensis, and later finds in Ethiopia. It explores symbolic treatment of the dead, the geological timescale, Pleistocene and Holocene, and archaeological methods such as radiocarbon dating, pollen analysis, and isotopic studies of animal teeth. It emphasizes how humans adapted to environmental changes during the end of the last ice age, setting the stage for agriculture and settlement. Lecture number 2, Stones and Bones, the first fossil families. Human evolution is framed as a branching river with Australopithecines, Paranthropus, and eventually the genus Homo. The lecture discusses what makes us human: bipedalism, brain size, sociality, and tool use. Fossil sites like Oduve Gorge and Kubifora reveal early Homo habilis specimens. Tool manufacture is examined as evidence of foresight, adaptability, and cognitive development. Lecture number 3, Biocultural Adaptation and Homo erectus. The rise of Homo erectus and Homo ergaster is traced from Africa to Asia, marking the first global expansion of our genus. With modern body proportions, reduced jaws, larger brains, and certain tools, notably hand axes, Homo erectus represents a leap in adaptation. Fire, cooking, and social structures likely fueled brain growth. Fossils like Turkana illustrate anatomy and development. The lecture also explores transitional species such as Homo rhodesiensis and Homo heidelbergensis, I apologize on those pronunciations, which were possible links between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. Lecture number 4, How Homo sapiens Left Africa. This lecture covers migration and dispersal. Building on the legacy of Homo erectus, modern humans spread out of Africa using adaptive strategies in diet and technology. Archaeogenetics, or DNA studies, is introduced as a powerful tool that both clarifies and complicates the fossil record. Finds at certain places, such as in Georgia, and genetic evidence help reconstruct when and how Homo sapiens expanded into Eurasia. That should clarify Georgia the country, not the state. Lecture number 5, Ex-Woman. Meet our ancient relatives. Here the focus shifts to the Denisovans, a sister group to Neanderthals discovered from DNA in a finger bone found in Denisova cave in Siberia. The lecture explores interbreeding among Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, as well as the genetic legacy still present in modern populations. It highlights how genetics have revolutionized our understanding of human diversity and ancestry. Lecture number 6, Did the Neanderthals really go extinct? This lecture examines the fate of the Neanderthals, long portrayed as brutish but recognized as skilled toolmakers, artists, and survivors of Ice Age Europe. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests interbreeding rather than complete extinction. Their disappearance is framed as a story of absorption into modern human populations, with traces of their DNA still present in many people to this day. Lecture 7, Sailing to Australia 60,000 plus years ago. This lecture explores one of humanity's boldest early achievements, long-distance sea travel, to reach Sahu, the combined Ice Age landmass of Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. People had to cross deep stretches of open ocean to do so. This was not a one-time accident, but required deliberate planning, seafaring skills, and coordinated group effort. Archaeological evidence from certain sites in northern Australia and other places show human habitation over 60,000 years ago, making it one of the earliest known settlements outside of Africa. The tools and ochre found there suggest both technological adaptability and symbolic culture. The journey also reveals social complexities, since transporting entire groups, including children, implies forethought, resource management, and navigation skills. This moment is often called humanity's first great voyage, demonstrating the ingenuity and daring of early Homo sapiens. Lecture 8, The Origins of Language and Music. Language and music are examined as key to what made humans unique. The lecture considers anatomical evidence such as the hyoid bone, vocal tract, and brain regions related to speech. Archaeologists trace symbolic thought through early artifacts, suggesting that language emerged gradually, perhaps 200,000 to 100,000 years ago. Music is linked to early bone flutes found in Europe, dating to about 40,000 years ago, and rhythmic sound making with percussive instruments, which all of this, beyond communication, both language and music reinforced social bonds, aiding teaching and memory, and allowed for cultural transmission across generations. The ability to sing, chant, or tell stories may have created shared identities, strengthening survival in larger groups. Music in particular seems tied to ritual and emotional expression, marking it as a universal human trait with deep evolutionary roots. Lecture 9, Handprints in Time, Early Art and Objects. This lecture emphasizes the creativity and symbolism of early humans. Cave paintings, engravings, and carvings, such as hand stencils in El Castillo, Spain, and Cholet, France, show deliberate artistic expression dating back tens of thousands of years. Figurines like the famous Venus statues, which you can find more about in several of my other videos, especially on my other channel, History Unraveled with Dr. Duncan, they may have represented fertility or spirituality or some kind of social identity. And though their precise meaning remains up for debate, their mere existence is still incredible and something that is going to continue discussion for decades and centuries to come. These artifacts are more than decoration. They mark a turning point in human cognition, reflecting abstract thought and symbolic communication and possibly religious or shamanic practices. Art also demonstrates cooperation. Since the creation of murals deep in caves required lighting, planning, and shared effort, in many ways art was humanity's first storytelling medium, bridging practical survival with an imaginative world as well. Lecture 10, Ancient Jewelry as Extension of the Mind. Ornamentation is presented as a critical cognitive leap. Beads, shells, and pendants show that humans externalized identity, status, and memory in physical form. Some of the earliest known jewelry, made from Nassaria shells over 70,000 years ago in Africa, required both symbolic vision and technical skill. Jewelry acted as a social signal, communicating group belonging, wealth, or prestige, much as it does today. The lecture suggests that these objects represent an extended mind, where tools and adornments became part of human thought and interaction. Wearing an ornament may have also reinforced storytelling, ritual, or even mate selection, reflecting how symbolic objects could influence social dynamics in profound ways. Lecture 11, Death and Burial in the Prehistoric World. Burial practices are examined as windows into early human belief systems. Neanderthal graves sometimes included flowers, tools, or ochre, suggesting symbolic care for the dead. Later Paleolithic burials became more elaborate, with grave goods, jewelry, and animal remains placed alongside the deceased. Such practices indicate not only grief and remembrance, but also possible ideas about an afterlife or spiritual realm. Cemeteries reveal social distinctions, as certain individuals were buried with richer offerings than others, hinting at emerging hierarchies. The lecture also considers the role of ritual mourning and community in shaping how humans confronted death, making burial one of the earliest universal cultural practices. Lecture 12, Feast or Famine, the Paleolithic Diet. The so-called caveman diet is re-examined through archaeology and science. Isotopic studies of bones combined with dental analysis show that humans had extremely varied diets depending on environment. In coastal areas, shellfish and fish were staples. In inland areas, game animals, nuts, and tubers dominated. Unlike the modern paleo diet trend, real Paleolithic diets were flexible and opportunistic. Food scarcity shaped innovation. Some groups developed storage techniques, while others broadened their diets to include less desirable but more reliable foods. The lecture emphasizes adaptability as the key survival trait, not a fixed menu, but a willingness to eat pretty much whatever the landscape provided. Lecture 13, Why There's No Such Thing as Cavemen. This lecture dismantles the outdated stereotype of cavemen as brutish, club-carrying people. While caves did preserve artifacts well, they were not the primary homes of early humans. Instead, humans often built shelters, lived in open-air camps, or migrated seasonally. Caves were special use spaces for ritual, or perhaps refuge, or sometimes, in the case of Chauvet and other locations, for its symbolic art. The caveman myth originated in the 19th century, reflecting more about Victorian imagination than about real prehistory. Archaeological evidence shows that early humans were highly diverse in lifestyle, creative in building, and adaptable to different ecosystems. By reframing cavemen as complex hunter-gatherers, the lecture underscores how stereotypes oversimplify a deeply varied past. Lecture 14, Early Technology, Axes, Harpoons, and Hooks. Technological innovation is portrayed as central to survival. There's a particular type of axe, the Acheulean hand axes, as well as harpoons and fishing hooks that represent leaps in foresight and problem solving. These tools required not only skill to craft, but also the ability to teach others, evidence of cultural learning and transmission. Harpoons allowed hunting of large fish and marine mammals, while fishing hooks expanded diets to new resources. The lecture notes that these technologies reveal humans as experimenters, constantly testing new strategies. Over time, the toolkits became more diverse and specialized, reflecting a deepening relationship between human ingenuity and environmental challenges. Lecture 15, Coming to the Americas, 20,000 plus years ago. The peopling of the Americas is one of archaeology's most debated questions. This lecture reviews theories of migration across the Bering Land Bridge during the Ice Age, down a coastal kelp highway, or possibly through earlier little understood routes. Sites like Mount Verde in Chile, which dates to about 14,500 years ago, suggests human presence far earlier than once believed. While genetic studies confirm multiple migration waves, these early pioneers faced massive glaciers, shifting climates, and unknown landscapes, yet they spread rapidly across the continent. Their story highlights resilience, adaptability, and innovation, qualities that remain central to human history. Lecture 16, Living Dangerously as the Last Ice Age Ended. As the last ice age ended, the world transformed dramatically. Rising sea levels reshaped coastlines, forests expanded, and grasslands gave way to wetlands. Humans faced both opportunities, such as new plants, freshwater, and animals, and also new dangers, climate instability, megafaunal extinction, among others. The loss of mammoths, mastodons, and giant sloths forced communities to diversify diets and shift strategies. This lecture underscores how rapid climate change tested human adaptability and how communities responded with new tools, new settlement patterns, and social networks to survive an unpredictable world. Lecture 17, Brewing Beer and Baking Bread in the Levant. Grain processing in the Levant during the Natufian period may have been about more than food. It might have fueled ritual and social gatherings. Archaeological evidence of ground stone tools, storage pits, and charred grains suggests experimentation with cereals long before agriculture. Some scholars argue that beer brewing may have motivated plant domestication as much as bread making did. Fermentation and baking both required specialized knowledge and encouraged community activity. from harvesting to ritual feasting. This lecture frames food not only as sustenance, but as a catalyst for cultural bonding and symbolic life. Lecture 18, the hunter-gatherers begin to settle down. The Natufians and other early groups began settling in resource-rich areas, building more permanent houses and storing food. This semi-sedentary lifestyle reflects a shift in how humans organize themselves socially and economically. Villages reveal evidence of long-term occupation, suggesting that groups were no longer fully nomadic. With settlement came new challenges: disputes over territory, the need for storage solutions, and the beginnings of more complex social hierarchies. These communities laid the groundwork for agriculture and later urban life, representing a key turning point in human history. Lecture 19. Secrets of Cave Art, Ceramics, and Cattle. This lecture examines the intersection of symbolic and practical innovation. Cave art reached new levels of sophistication, while the development of ceramics transformed cooking and storage. The domestication of cattle marked another revolution, reshaping diets and social rituals. Cattle were not just food, but symbols of wealth and status, often tied to ritual sacrifice. The combination of art, pottery, and domestication reflects the blending of practical needs with symbolic and cultural meaning, a hallmark of the Neolithic world. Finally, Lecture 20 was agricultural a revolution or an accident? The course concludes by reconsidering the so-called Neolithic Revolution. Was it truly a sudden, transformative event, or a gradual, regionally varied process? Archaeological evidence points to a mosaic of local experiments in plants and animal domestication, influenced by climate shifts and social needs. For some communities, agriculture meant stability. For others, it brought harder labor, disease, and social inequality. The lecture emphasizes that agriculture was both an accident of opportunity and a revolution of long-term consequences, setting humanity on a path towards cities, states, and the modern world. Now, there's a lot in there, and I hope you found that useful or interesting. I found a lot of it to be very interesting. But as I was going through this, I realized that there were a few key arguments that I really wanted to hone in on that I think that the presenter makes time and time again as she goes through it, or at least they're the things that I just felt like were the most important to highlight because they were argumentatively distinct in my opinion. So let's take a look at what I call the argumentative distinctions. The first one is answering the question, why did humans walk upright? One of the central questions in paleoanthropology is why our ancestors adopted habitual bipedalism. Several competing theories exist, each highlighting different selective pressures. Darwin's early proposal emphasized tool use. Standing upright freed the hands for making and carrying implements. Clifford Jolly's seed-eating hypothesis argued that bipedalism evolved as an efficient way to feed on grasses and seeds in open savanna environments. Owen Lovejoy's socio-reproductive hypothesis suggested that upright walking concealed female ovulation and promoted male provisioning, thereby reducing male competition and sexual dimorphism. And it goes on and on. And I would say that the diversity of these arguments reflects the complexity of human evolution. No single factor explains bipedalism, but rather a combination of social, dietary, technological, and environmental forces likely shape this defining human trait. That is one of the key arguments that she is making as she goes through all those different theories. Another question is, what happened to the Neanderthals? Of course, the fate of the Neanderthals has long fascinated scientists, with two main schools of thought offering divergent interpretations. One perspective sees them as victims of extinction, unable to compete with Homo sapiens or adapt to rapid climate fluctuations at the end of the Ice Age. This view stresses population decline, as well as resource stress and cultural inferiority. The alternative assimilation hypothesis, however, reframes their disappearance as less an extinction than emerging. Neanderthals interbred with Homo sapiens, and their genetic legacy lives on today in modern humans outside Africa. Genetic evidence has demonstrated that many contemporary populations retain Neanderthal DNA, supporting the idea of absorption rather than replacement. The debate underscores a larger question: should Neanderthals be remembered as evolutionary failures or as close kin whose identity continues within us? Another question that she seeks to answer is, why did humans adopt agriculture? The so-called Neolithic Revolution is another major site of contention. Traditionally, scholars framed agriculture as a sudden and transformative turning point in human history, a revolution that abruptly replaced foraging with farming, setting the stage for cities, states, and civilization. Yet, more recent perspectives argue that agriculture was not revolutionary at its inception, but the result of gradual, regionally specific experiments in plant and animal domestication. In this view, farming began piecemeal, shaped by climate shifts and local cultural needs, with some communities adopting it slowly and unevenly, while others continued foraging for millennia. Agriculture was both a revolution in its long-term consequences and an accident of opportunity in its origins. This distinction matters because it challenges whether the shift to farming should be understood as progress or as a trade-off that came with new hardships such as increased labor, disease, and social inequality. Another question is the origins of symbolic culture. The emergence of symbolic thought such as art, jewelry, burials, rituals, and abstract communication is often portrayed as a defining leap in human evolution. One interpretation is the cognitive revolution that suggests that symbolic culture appeared suddenly and dramatically, with Homo sapiens marking a clear break from all earlier hominins. Supporters point to the sudden flourish of cave art, figurines, and ornaments in the Upper Paleolithic as evidence of a creative explosion. Yet the gradualist view complicates this narrative by highlighting earlier examples. Neanderthals buried their dead, used pigments, and possibly created simple art. Denisovans left genetic traces of cultural sophistication. From this perspective, symbolic culture did not emerge all at once, but evolved incrementally across multiple human species. This debate reshapes our understanding of when and how modern behavior began, and whether it is uniquely ours or a shared inheritance from a broader family of ancient relatives. Another big debate that she addresses is, of course, routes into the Americas. The peopling of the Americas remains one of the most contested questions in all of archaeology. The traditional model argued that humans entered via an inland, ice-free corridor that opened in North America as glaciers retreated about 13,000 years ago. This view aligned with the Clovis first theory, emphasizing big game hunters who spread southward through the continent. However, new discoveries such as Monteverde in Chile and genetic evidence have challenged this account, pointing to a much earlier presence. An alternative coastal kelp highway model argues that people used boats to follow rich marine ecosystems along the Pacific Rim, arriving long before the ice-free corridor was passable. The debate is not only about migration routes, but about how adaptable and resourceful early Americans were, whether on land or sea. These journeys required planning, social cooperation, and the ability to thrive in radically new environments. Finally, a big thing that she really argues much about is drivers of technological innovation. Early technology provides another arena of interpretive debate. One school emphasizes its purely practical role, as axes, harpoons, and hooks emerged as survival tools to hunt, process, and expanded new food sources. This view sees technology as an adaptive response to environmental challenges with incremental improvements driven by necessity. Yet others argue that tools also functioned as social signals. The sexy hand axe theory, for instance, suggests that the ability to create symmetrical, well-made hand axes displayed cognitive skill and manual dexterity, serving as a form of social currency that could aid in mate selection and also show off a variety of skills. In this reading, tools were as much about identity and competition and communication as they were about subsistence. The distinction highlights the dual role of technology in human history. It was both a means of survival and a medium of cultural expression. Those were at least some of the big arguments that I saw her making. I'm sure there are many more that I could touch upon, but those were ones that really stood out to me. Now let's move on to what I thought to be some fun facts. Now, I have mentioned some of these things already, but I think that reiterating what I just found to be some fun and interesting little tidbits to really be worth digging into. So first of all, the earliest sea voyages really fascinated me. In order to reach Australia over 60,000 years ago, humans had to sail across open water, meaning the world's first mariners predate written history by tens of thousands of years. Just keep that in scope. Also, those hand stencils that we have seen many times before, those are in some ways some of the earliest form of being able to identify yourself. The oldest known cave art in Europe is not animals, but human handprints. Negative stencils made by blowing pigment around hands pressed to cave walls, which all of us are familiar with when we were a kid and started to do that ourselves in some kind of kindergarten class or something. But it appears as though this could have been some really important identifying feature that proved to be an incredibly useful tool. Another interesting fact, the X-woman was discovered in a pinky bone. As you recall, the X-woman was part of discovering the connection between the Denisovans and, of course, the Homo sapiens, and the entire Denisovan lineage, now recognized as a major branch of humanity, was first identified from a single tiny finger bone in Siberia's Denisova cave. Another interesting thing is that jewelry is older than farming. Shell beads and other ornaments worn as jewelry are at least 70,000 years old, showing people were decorating themselves tens of millennia before agriculture. Also, Neanderthals may have buried their dead with flowers. Pollen traces at Shanidar Cave in Iraq suggest flowers were placed in graves, an early gesture of symbolic ritual. The first beer may predate bread. I already mentioned that, but I still find that to be just an absolutely interesting element. Also, I still think that the idea of dispelling that whole caveman theory to be just one of the most interesting things that I have engaged with, but probably my favorite little tidbit that I've already mentioned was the sexy hand axe theory, which, as I've already mentioned, was supposedly one of the earliest ways that people would show off their skill, their dexterity, and they would make really ornate axes that were also meant to be a really useful tool for trying to find a mate and also to just show off their skill. So there's just a few really interesting facts in my opinion. But let me tell you my personal reaction to this series. I really enjoyed this course. I mean, a lot of the material is far outside of my own area of expertise, but that actually made it even more engaging. It was fascinating to hear the range of ideas and theories and approaches that scholars use to uncover the human past. And I think that the presenter, again, her name is Suzanne Pilaar Birch, I think that she does an excellent job of making each of these topics really come alive. And as a historian, I'm often grounded in the written word, so it was refreshing to listen to an archaeologist and anthropologist carefully walk through the evidence piece by piece and explain why certain theories exist. That process of seeing how knowledge is built from fragments was especially compelling, and it gave me a new appreciation for how different disciplines work together to tell the story of humanity. I really did enjoy this series greatly. I think the fact that I have a tangential connection to it as a historian really made it all the more interesting. Sometimes having that tangential connection to some fields make it a little harder to really care for what the other fields' approach to trying to uncover history or come up with theories can be. But in this case, I really enjoyed it, and all in all, I really appreciated this series. So that being said, who is this series for? Well, I think that this course is perfect for anyone who's curious about where we came from and how early humans lived. And if you enjoy anthropology or archaeology or history, you will find it both accessible and fascinating. It's also a great fit for people who love learning about theories of human origins, how migration happened, or how language and art developed, and how survival strategies helped to shape the world that we know today. Even if you don't have a background in these subjects, I think, again, that Suzanne Pilaar Birch explains the material in a way that makes complex science understandable and engaging. I think she does an excellent job, to be clear. I enjoy pretty much every great courses that I have listened to or watched, but I think that she did a really good job at taking very complex concepts and making them quite understandable. And so I think I not only enjoyed the content, but the presenter herself, I thought did an excellent job. I'd also say that this is, of course, for students or teachers or just lifelong learners. It's a valuable resource for thinking about the big questions of what it means to be human. So who is this not for? Well, this series probably won't be for you if you're looking for a light overview or quick facts about early humans. The presenter spends time digging into the evidence, explaining competing theories, and sometimes leaving questions open rather than offering neat final answers. And so if you prefer history that's told as a straightforward narrative, or you get impatient with scientific detail, this might feel a little slow at times. It also covers 20 full lectures, so it asks for a real investment of time and attention. But if you're willing to take that journey, I do think that there is considerable payoff. Overall, I found this course to be an excellent deep dive into the history of early humans. The presenter, Suzanne Pilaar Birch, brings together archaeology, anthropology, and climate science in a way that really shows how complex our origins are and how much there still is to discover. This course goes beyond presenting information and encourages you to reflect on the larger questions about what it really means to be human. Of course, I'd love to know what you guys are thinking about this series. If you've listened to it, or if this has given you an interest in listening to it or watching it, please let me know your thoughts about it in the comments and how it might stack up to other courses that are similar to this, or if you have something else that you really want to talk about in regards to this series, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you're thinking. And of course, while you're here, please go check out in one of my many other reviews, whether that is also in the great courses or whether that is a very short introduction series, which I also have a playlist for, or if you are interested in something completely different. I review a wide variety of things, whether that is high fantasy or books for young adults. Please check it out. As you may recall, the name of the channel is Spencer Reads Everything, so I'd like to think there's something that will interest you. If you are enjoying this video or any of my other videos, please share them. The more people that know about this channel, the more videos I can make. And don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.